happy child, like most children. Um, and I was a loving child. I'd give my friends everything, almost made my mother mad at me for that. But I was so loving that I was vulnerable. And as a result, I was hurt very easily. And I remember when I was in elementary school, it was probably around the sixth grade, being jumped after school, getting into fights and getting beat up. And I remember distinctly one day specifically when I ran all the way home because these guys jumped on me. And when I got home, I made a decision that day that I wasn't going to be a victim anymore. My peers named me loco, meaning crazy. And naturally, I felt compelled to live out this role that I was given. So I had to be the first to do all the dangerous stunts in the neighborhood. I had to be the first to fight, jump in, and kick fights off because after all, I was loco. Um, and these words, this title that I received began to manifest itself in a very dangerous way in my life. And I began hanging around guys that were a lot older than me. And in those circles, I also received names. They began calling me the Dirt Devil and Hoover the Vacuum Cleaner. These were supposed to be badges of honor for how much drugs and alcohol I could consume. And, what was a joke to them began manifesting itself very, very violently in my life. And so I tried to get myself together, and basically I had to stay back because no school in my jurisdiction would accept me, because my record was so bad. And the following year, um, my school said, well, if you go to NA&A, then we'll let you come back. And so I did that, and I made it to a progress grade. And I probably had the best grades I ever had, but I was still living a double life. I was still in the street at night. I was still hustling. I was still carrying guns. I was still doing everything that I was doing. And I was never fulfilled by those things. I was never satisfied. And my reward for those things was a 40-year prison sentence. I got locked up, and I received my indictment papers, and I'm looking at these papers, 20 years, 40 years, 20 years, 40 years, and I'm looking at it, desperately hopeless, thinking to myself, I've thrown my life away. And as I began to cry, breaking down in that cell, my bunk buddy told me, man, he was facing a life sentence. He said, man, it's not over. Just put your faith in Jesus Christ. And at the time, I didn't even really understand. I didn't understand what that meant. My mother had been trying to get me to go to church. She had given her life to Christ maybe 18 months before I got locked up. And, but I was so far gone, I wasn't trying to hit nothing. But at that moment, I was tired. I was tired. I was tired of running. I was tired of staying up for days. I was tired of chasing and not being satisfied. And that day, I surrendered my life to Jesus Christ, crying. And I began just reading the Bible. And almost effortlessly, my life began to change. I stopped cussing in a matter of weeks, and, I just had this assurance that I knew God was with me. Despite all the time I was facing, despite the environment I was in, I felt this comfort because I knew that God was with me. And I received a 40-year sentence, and I served 12 and a half years on that sentence. I got locked up when I was 17, and I got out when I was 29. But at that moment when I gave my life to Christ, it was like a light bulb went on. And I knew I no longer had to play that role. I knew I no longer had to be loco. I no longer had to be the dirt devil or the Hoover vacuum cleaner because I knew that God had me. And I got my GED the same year I was scheduled to graduate in 2000. And it symbolized a turn for me, like my life had gotten back on track. And from that point, I took advantage of everything that was available for me in the prison system. I got 4 trades, 48 college credits for sociology, and got in a seminary, got involved in the church real heavily. And God just continued to bless me and show me